signed Framber Valdez, leader fan radio network.
You know it's not good baseball.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes, 2 seconds past the hour, 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. Welcome back. It is a Tuesday edition of the Bumper to Bumper program. As most of you know by now, my name is Dan Barreiro, former Ink Stain Wretch newspaper of the Twin Cities. Guardsey's the producer of the program, two-time state high school tennis champion, and the radio voice of the eventual NCAA champion Golden Gopher women's basketball team. I say eventual. Doesn't have to be this season, but now it seems like it is inevitable.
Collision course. You see where it's going.
A Final Four run and maybe even beyond there. We're delighted you're along for the ride today. I will give you details on the guest lineup in just a minute. News, as most of you know by now, not good regarding your Minnesota Twins, and the worst-case scenario has indeed played out regarding Pablo Lopez. Pretty much certainly out for the 2026 season. Feels a twinge in his elbow, and next thing you know, he's on the track for his second, I believe, Tommy John surgery. They are going to look for a second opinion, which is, I think, the least anyone would consider doing in a situation like this, but none of that looks particularly good. And as I said at the top of the show, thank God we were edged out by the Detroit Tigers for top free agent pitcher Framber Valdez. Because what a waste it would have been. If you're down Pablo, suddenly you're down two really good starting pitchers, and you need at least three or four if you're going to be, at least three, if you're going to be a contender. So it would have been like an incredible waste of money to sign Valdez. I'm assuming most of you know that the latest poll ad, in this case it's Tom Pollad, is shouting that from the rooftops and actually expecting people to pay attention to it as if it has meaning. It's gone from, does Joe Pollad exist? To Tom Pollad, God, here he comes again. He wants to talk some more. Jesus, there's nothing left to say to Tom Pollad. Can he go away for a while? He's too available. He's basically in the lunchroom with the clubhouse. He's in the weight room with members of his team.
He's the meerkat.
He's apparently become
Meerkat 2.0.
The meerkat. Then is there anybody who has the common sense to sit him down to say, stop with the mythology about Valdez? Stop. Do you think anybody's going to believe you? In fact, we got bonus Lavelle today at 4:30. Who was the starting pitcher? This was one of Lavelle's.
It was Yu Darvish.
It was Yu Darvish.
Yeah.
Remember?
Oh, yeah.
Remember
How
Lavelle?
could I forget?
Oh, we're right. We didn't get him, but we made a legitimate offer for him.
We didn't give him the extra year that the Cubs, I think, ended up giving him, right?
Maybe Tom Pollad remembers that or is inspired by it. Does anybody in their right mind? I mean, you want to put up the commemorative print? We were second. And by the way, we didn't even really know that they were second. They were probably 15th. It doesn't take anything to say what Tom Pollad did. What a 1-2-3 punch that would have been. What a find that would have been if we'd have added him. And, we talked about it. And we might have even, I don't know, did he actually use the quote, he made an offer, or we sniffed around? Whatever it was he said. What universe are these people in the Minnesota Twins organization living in that they think that's going to have any kind of impact on people, that they're going to go, this Pollad is serious? What's the point of that? What does it do other than infuriate me, and I'm assuming annoy a lot of other people who are just going, why? You're better off, even if you think you did designate to your general manager, take a look at him, kick the tires on him about what it might cost. Does anybody in their right mind, what did he end up getting?
3 years, $115.
What are we doing? We've just dropped the payroll $65 to $70 million the last two off seasons. Does he think we're idiots? Yes, the Twins always, it doesn't matter what Pollad is in charge. Every Pollad thinks we're a bunch of sheep. Didn't that strike you the same way? It's like, Why bring it up? What does it accomplish?
Nothing.
Nothing, because we don't even have any reporting that's been done by reliable sources to say,
right.
Well, he went to the Tigers, but the Twins made a pretty credible 3-year offer for him that approached $100 million. Right? Has anybody reported that?
Not that I've seen.
All we have is what Tom Pohlad told the reporters. Did he think that that's going to buy off people? It's mind-boggling. And again, they may feel vindicated that they didn't get him, because I guess you can look at it two ways. You could say if they actually had gotten Valdez, they might have. They'd still have two really good pitchers at the top,
right? And
you still might have a chance to compete. Now you're down to one really good pitcher at the top, right? We haven't traded Joe Ryan yet.
Not yet.
And we haven't traded Byron Buxton yet.
I did see that Tom Pohlad had a nice long conversation with Joe Ryan today.
Good.
Down by the dugout.
Well, did Ryan ask to be dealt? Because now I wonder if Ryan might want to be dealt.
I just know they were talking.
It's what we're learning about pitching is what? Even if your arm has been reconstructed by the miracles of science, I should say, it's not going to hold up, right? In fact, I think, isn't there a quote from Pablo saying the shelf life on a Tommy John surgery, I think, is like 6 years. And he's way past that. And he was hoping to continue to be the exception to the rule. He missed a lot of last season as well, did he not?
He sure did, yep.
And now, I was about to say it's over before it began, but I think it was already over. It just feels more over, because the one thing you could hang your hat on was, well, they got two good pitchers at the top, and maybe some others who can emerge and have from time to time. But at least we know games 1 and 2 of a series, we got a chance to be competitive. And now, in devastating fashion, that has been taken away from your favorite baseball team.
And Pablo, I know it's not supposed to matter, but he seems like such a good dude, and he actually seemed like he got into the bit about being a Twin. Like, I'll always love him forever when he was Game 1 starter in that infamous playoff series that we won.
How could you not?
Wearing the Johan jersey, right? And he's wearing the Johan jersey. He caught Johan's first pitch.
Correct.
Like, he just got the whole bit of what I think it meant to be a Twin. What Twins fans like.
Yes.
He got it. And he gets it.
Very professional guy.
Totally.
Very professional guy. There's no question.
Does a ton in the community and all of that. And the first team workout, that's what I keep going back to. The first time this
I think it was the third inning of his, what do they call it, simulated game?
Something like that.
And it was the first pitch, I think, or his first it was either his first pitch or his first warm-up pitch for the third inning. And that was it. And he said, uh-oh.
Then it's toast. And he's done.
And here's what's sad. Yesterday, You're trained in this business to not assume the worst because you don't know. But you hear pitching arm, elbow,
right,
twinge,
right, tightness,
and you go tightness or whatever it is, and you go, that's probably it, man. That's probably it, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. He had Tommy John surgery in 2014.
That's a long time ago.
And what he remembers is that people said, okay, you got about 6 years. And then he gets past the 6-year mark, right? In 2019, he's going, I'm still alive. And so at that point, he began hoping that maybe he was going to be the exception to the rule. Here's the quote. When you hear some tear on a ligament that you need it to pitch, you need it to perform, then you want to go for the option that is going to fix that issue from the root. Brings disappointment, overanalyzing things. The procedure brings disappointment or makes you feel like you failed. And that's what he said. He feels like I've let everybody down. Obviously, he's let nobody down. There's no control that he can have over what has become, like I said, the norm if you're a major league pitcher. There's just no getting around it, right?
Right.
And that's where we're at. So we'll see what the second opinion indicates, but all bets are that one way or another, his season is over, and the Twins season, which was probably already over anyway, is now really over. Until we remind ourselves that, as Aaron Gleeman points out, there's a few interesting free agent pitchers still on the market, because I'm sure we're going to gobble one or two of those up to compensate for this loss. Don't you expect that?
We'll either do that or we will slash the $2 beers to $1 beers pregame and try to get some more people in.
Yeah, you're right about that. All right, we're going to get out of here early because we have a 3:15 guest coming up. I mentioned Lavelle. He's 4:30. Luigi, 5:30?
Yes.
Louis, Tuesday regular at 5:30. News breaking overnight that the Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights leader, Democratic presidential candidate, has died at the age of 84 years old. We're going to chat when we come back with a Pulitzer Prize winning biographer and journalist who we've had on the show several times before, Jonathan Eig. One of his best, his triumph, his Pulitzer triumph was a MLK biography that came out several years ago, and Jesse Jackson features in that. And in all the research he did, I know Jonathan will have much to say about sizing up the Jesse Jackson legacy as well. He is coming up in just a couple minutes. A quick pause and back with
Fan.
Our next guest has been on with us several times before, although it's been a while. His first book, in fact, I think that was the first time we had him on, is called Luckiest Man, The Life and Death of Lou Gehrig. He also wrote Opening Day, the story of Jackie Robinson's first season, The Secret Plot That Captured Al Capone, The Birth of the Pill, How Four Crusaders Reinvented Sex and Launched a Revolution, Ali, A Life in 2017, and King, A Life as an MLK in 2023. He is a Pulitzer Prize winning biographer, writer, journalist, Jonathan Eig, kind enough to give us time on a very, I'm assuming, demanding day. Jonathan, it's good to catch up with you. It's been a while, and thank you for giving us a minute or two.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much for the time. So give me a little of a sense of course, here's the mistake I made. I've had the book at home. I had it today to refresh my memory on some of the Jackson stuff that you write about. And, of course, I left it in my place as opposed to bringing it here. So give me, let's maybe we start here, because I think one of the stories I'd read previously was that it was a conversation with a number of individuals, including Jesse Jackson, back when you were researching the Ali book, that may have prompted you to consider the idea of tackling the enormous subject of MLK. Is that true?
That is true. You know, people like Jesse Jackson, who knew Martin Luther King, felt like his legacy had been really not well served, we've forgotten how radical King was. We've forgotten how rooted in faith his radicalism was. And when I met Jesse Jackson, was when I was working on my Muhammad Ali book, you know, it just occurred to me that this was a guy who worked with him and knew him really well. And they were very different. You know, they didn't always get along. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, you know, we need to embrace those stories, those complicated stories. So I was very fortunate that I got to spend some time with Reverend Jackson and to ask him about his relationship with King. And he, you know, these guys, they knew King as a person, as a friend, as somebody who wasn't perfect, who sometimes, you know, got impatient with them. And sure. Jesse Jackson, you know, and King had their differences sometimes. It was just fascinating to hear his stories.
Well, to me, that's where you try to thread the needle, right? I think that's a lot of what you wanted to do with MLK was, quote unquote, humanize him. And that included maybe putting a lot of stuff in that people said, well, I wish you didn't include it. But I would say the same thing about the debates, the arguments, the disagreements that went on. That, to me, that is what makes the story so rich, because to assume that everybody, even in the movement, you know, was on the same page all the time, got along, that doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's interesting because one of the things that Jesse Jackson talked about is, you know, he came out of real poverty, Jesse. He, you know, didn't know his father and grew up very poor. He's younger than King, and he saw King, what he was doing, and wanted to get involved. But a lot of the younger activists thought King was too conservative. Right. They thought he was kind of an elitist. And Jesse Jackson, you know, was able to see past that.
Give me based on all the reporting you have done, what brought them together? How did they meet, and how did that relationship grow during that era?
Well, you've got to remember that when King started getting involved in the Montgomery bus boycott, he's only 26 years old, and nobody had really given young folks permission to say, you know, you can do this. You can get out and march. You can go out and sit in at lunch counters. You can push yourself onto these buses. And that, for someone like Jesse Jackson, who was, you know, just a college student when he first got involved, that was incredibly exciting. And then to be rubbing elbows with him, to be in the room And as the movement began to evolve, they began thinking more about economic issues. Jesse Jackson, of course, helped found Operation Breadbasket in Chicago. This was, him taking the torch from King and seeing what he can do with it. And I think, had King lived, he and Jesse Jackson would have been pursuing a lot of the same things.
Where did they agree? Where did they occasionally clash? Because as you say, their styles were certainly very different at the least.
Well, they certainly agreed that desegregation was the key. And one of the things Jesse Jackson talked to me about a lot is that they weren't looking for integration. They weren't saying you have to let us be in the same classroom. They're just saying give us the opportunity. Just tear down those barriers to entry and then watch what we can do. And they certainly agreed on that putting an end to the systemic racism, to the institutionalized barriers to entry, the right to vote, the right to attend schools, just knock down those walls and watch what we can do. They certainly agreed on that. Now, by the time the late 60s come around, Jesse Jackson is starting to want to be more aggressive. He wants to get more involved in economic affairs, and King is actually going much the same direction. So I think that their disagreements were pretty insignificant.
So you write about this, as I recall, there was, I believe, just several days before the assassination, a March 30 staff meeting that King had with a number of individuals, including Jackson. In fact, I think you quote him as saying that he was wrestling, that MLK was wrestling with depression at this point, according to Jesse. And he kind of went off on several of the folks in that staff meeting, including Jesse, the age-old, I guess, question of whether he was too much of a self-promoter or wanted to go his own way. What do you remember reporting on that?
No, that's absolutely a key moment. And you got to remember the pressure King was under. The FBI is surveilling him. Americans are losing patience with him. 66% of all Americans say they disapprove of Martin Luther King. And they're organizing, they're planning the next big movement, and they're beginning to speak out on economic issues. And that's even more dangerous. People are really turning on King. And when someone like Jesse Jackson starts, coming into meetings and complaining about how things are going, it wasn't really anything Jesse did. It was just that King was his nerves were shot at that point, and he lashed out and had to cool off. But they, of course, made up. And in fact, on the last night of his life, King went out of his way to make sure Jesse was invited for dinner. And Jesse was there in the parking lot, waiting for King to get ready to go out to dinner. And then just as he was assassinated, Jesse was right there and watched King die. And of course, that's I think he lived the rest of his life in trying to fulfill the promise that and the respect that King had lent him.
In fact, I think what you wrote, the invitation you mentioned about dinner, joining us for dinner, Jackson at that point was down below, and King was up above, right? And then eventually, obviously, he came up onto that second floor balcony as well.
Yeah, that's right. King was on the balcony, and Jackson was in the parking lot. And then after the bullet was fired, Jackson ran up to the balcony.
What is, there's been some, over the years, disagreement, debate about whether in some ways Reverend Jackson exaggerated where he was and how he held on to MLK after the shooting, etc. Did you? I don't remember if you wrote very much about that or have done much reporting on that. What would you say to that discussion? Because it has gone on it did go on, I think, even within the civil rights community for a while.
Right. A lot of the civil rights activists, people close to King, were frustrated with Reverend Jackson because they thought he was being an egotist and self-promoting himself and saying that he was holding King when he died. And some people felt like perhaps he had, rubbed King's blood on his shirt and then wore the shirt on TV. And I just didn't think it was very important. We all do things in the moments of trauma and violence that maybe, and we all tell stories differently and interpret our memories differently. The important thing is that King was there with Jackson. They were together in Memphis working on that sanitation worker strike, and Jackson was there when King was assassinated. And if he certainly had a large ego all of his life, and if he was a contradictory, complicated person at times, I don't think that is really what we ought to focus on. He devoted his life to the spirit of King's work and the civil rights movement, and that's what we should really focus on.
He sought the 1984 Democratic nomination for president, I think becoming the first black man to wage a nationwide campaign involving for a major party's endorsement. Give me your perspective on, the bigger picture, what was maybe starting with that period where he becomes more of a political figure. And I think, in fact, the next time around even won Michigan, and there were people even starting to think of him, could he be a front runner? Give us a sense of perspective on where he fits in there.
Well, you got to remember this is the mid-'80s, or in the middle of the Reagan era, and the civil rights movement has been sort of broken apart after King's assassination. And Jesse Jackson's candidacy was very important. It was a moment of real hope and I think excitement for a lot of people. And it's worth remembering that he got something like 7% of the white vote in the South. It was a real watershed moment, and it wasn't likely there was no chance that he was going to win.
Right.
I mean, I remember I was living in Louisiana at the time, and everybody knew that he had no chance to win, but it was still it felt historic, and I think it absolutely was. I think it was the first time we see a lot of white Americans getting used to the idea that this country could handle having a black president, and it certainly paved the way not just for Barack Obama, but for a lot of black political activists, black political candidates who worked on that campaign or even just saw that campaign to think about running for office. I think it was absolutely an American game changer. Where,
obviously did a lot of his work in grew up in Gary, Indiana, but obviously grew up in the Chicago area. Where, from your perspective, and again, your reporting, what was his strength there? What was he successful at doing, making Chicago kind of his home base for so long?
I think Jesse Jackson was just in the air. He was always there. He showed up, and I can't tell you how important that is. He showed up. I remember when my synagogue was receiving bomb threats. One day he just showed up in the sanctuary, unannounced. The rabbi didn't even know he was coming. Reverend Jackson just showed up to say, "Hey, I'm here for you guys." And that's something that you can't underestimate. All over Chicago for decades, this is a guy who showed up for marches, for protests, in defense of workers on strike. It wasn't just racial issues. Jesse Jackson was just a great advocate for peace and justice, and he showed up in so many places that I think that everybody in Chicago has a story about Jesse Jackson showing up.
After the assassination, the movement, then the challenges, all right, who can replace the irreplaceable? Fragments some. Ralph Abernathy emerges, but weren't there some battles too? Didn't Jesse have some battles in terms of strategy and other ways with Ralph Abernathy?
Well, there was a lot of question about who was going to succeed King, who was going to run the SCLC. And then I think it just became a question of who was going to be the most prominent leader for black Americans. And it just splintered. There was no way to replace, nobody could replace King. And I think it's safe to say, some people thought, Andrew Young would be the strongest person to either run the movement or run for president. But Jesse Jackson, again, sometimes because he had a healthy ego, he clearly emerged as the most visible and prominent black leader of his generation.
One of the things that has emerged today as people try to put together the story, the folks have gone back to listen to portions of the speech that he delivered at the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, I believe, in 1988. Progress will not come through boundless liberalism nor static conservatism, but at the critical mass of mutual survival, it takes two wings to fly. And that's being interpreted today as a remarkably, I don't want to call it centrist, but all-inclusive sort of political argument that doesn't always, fly very effectively today. Are we looking at that through the wrong lens, or how should we look at that speech and some of the things he was saying back in those days?
I think that's absolutely the right lens to look at it through, and I think it's the lens that Martin Luther King was also using when he said that the civil rights movement wasn't out to tear apart America. It wasn't out simply to promote the welfare and rights of black people. It was there to make the country better. It was there to make our union stronger, that we are a nation that is bound by inextricable threads of humanity, that we're all one. And we should try to act in that way. And I think, even Jesse Jackson, who was, clearly left-wing, very progressive, even Jesse Jackson was saying that he was doing this not to promote one portion of American society. He believed that we could all do this together. And I think that's a spirit that we don't hear much today.
No, that's true. One last item, Jonathan, for today. My recollection is, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but I thought it triggered in my head that you ended up spending a lot of time at the Lorraine Motel as you're putting together the biography on King. Is that correct?
A little bit. I certainly visited a couple times.
What stands out, or what stood out to you at that time, or when you did make those visits?
Well, when you go through the Civil Rights Museum there in Memphis at the Lorraine Motel, and you take the whole tour and you understand the history of the movement, and then at the end of the tour, you find yourself staring into the room where King was staying on the last night of his life. It's this incredibly powerful experience, and I think just to tie it back to Reverend Jackson, to think about the question of whether he held King in his arms as he died or not, or whether he used the opportunity to promote himself. It really doesn't matter. He was there at one of the most devastating moments in his lifetime, and to see his friend and his hero die right in front of him was clearly something that had to have been incredibly traumatic. And to his credit, he used it as inspiration for the work that he did the rest of his life.
It struck me, and of course this obviously starts with King, but many of the others who worked with him, just the enormous pressure at incredibly young ages, right? We think of, we always think of, everybody's in their 50s, 60s, 70s when they have the world on, the burden, the world's burden on their shoulders. These folks were very young, and pretty much every day, right? There's a crisis, or every day is we got to go here, or you're asked to be going there. Just the day-to-day, I guess I'm not surprised to hear that Jesse Jackson said that, among other things, as you well know, that MLK was battling depression. It would be hard not to, would it not?
No question about it. They weren't trained for this. They threw themselves into it because they believed in something bigger than themselves, and they sacrificed for it. King was 26 when he became the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott. Jesse Jackson was just a teenager when he started getting involved. So these are people who were fueled by their youthful passion, but somehow, maintained that passion all their lives. And that's a remarkable thing.
I really appreciate the time on a busy day. Is there a next project we can talk about or anticipate, or are you sort of like taking some time off, or where are you at?
No, I never take time off. I'm on to the next project. It's going to be very different. It's a biography of George Soros. And I'd be happy to talk to you about it when it gets a little closer.
That sounds good. We appreciate, again, the time. Good to catch up. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Take care.
Jonathan Eig, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, kind enough to join us. And he has never written a biography of Jesse Jackson, but he has written one on MLK. Jesse is in it in several places. There were two guys that came to mind for me today. Both have been guests on this program. One is the guy we just had, Jonathan Eig, and the other is Taylor Branch, who wrote, I still think, regarding the entire civil rights movement, the definitive trilogy. And we've not had him on in a long time, but he's been a great guest for us on King and the movement over the years. And Jonathan, like I said, there's been a lot of MLK biographies written. The one he wrote, I think it landed about now, I want to say 3 years ago, 2023 or so, is now considered the definitive piece. And that's got to be, Guardsy, pretty heady when you've got, leaders like Andy Young and Jesse Jackson, while you're researching your Ali book, saying, hey, you know what?
You should take a look at this.
Take a look at this, because as much has been written on King, we need somebody to kind of put it all in perspective. It'd be hard for that not to go to my head, right? And to his credit, he said, okay, and then worked on it for a long, I think, several years to put the thing together as well. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is open at 64686. And we've talked about this part before. What I mentioned late in the discussion, I guess it's unfair to expect that people today could begin to appreciate the burden day to day that King and his associates lived with, right? I mean, day after day after day. Not like, we're doing some demonstrating and then, we're going to go on vacation for about 3 months. We're going to go, we're just going to get away from it all. There was no getting away from it all. And they're all young. They're all in their teens, 20s, 30s as this thing is playing out. And, not an inside joke, but the challenge with MLK was every day there were like 15 requests. Come to our city. Here's our crisis. Here's why we need you. A riot taking place in Los Angeles. We need you there to try to quell things, to try to calm things down, etc. That was the daily life that he led, and it was in that tradition that Jesse Jackson was brought up. Nowhere near as monumental a name, I don't think. No question about that. But he was a part of that group that the King, relied on, and sometimes, as we talked about, Jonathan, brawled with, debated, argued, disagreed, because, and this is where Jesse kind of hurt himself sometimes, I think, where the perception was he was a little too slick, right? Everything was a little bit too programmed and at times maybe a little bit more performative. On the other hand, he did a lot of incredible work for a long period of time, went through his own ups and downs, his own controversies, a couple things, anti-Semitic things that he said that got him in trouble in New York. So in the end, there's flaws in pretty much anybody who's involved in any of these sorts of movements, but nevertheless, a name who definitely deserves a lot of discussion and recognition today for sure. And that's not glossing over some of the weaknesses, some of the challenges, some of the difficulties. But nevertheless, a huge name. And he was he 84? I think that was the and I have not seen him in public in a while. I don't know how much has been written about what kind of health he'd been in most recently. But I do know that the legacy is huge and the influence he had was significant. Let's do this. Let's get a pause in here.
You know what I liked about what Eig said? The big thing I took?
Yes.
I think everybody could take? How he talked about the Chicago roots and
yes.
How he just, I don't have the whole quote of what he said, but it struck me when he just said, well, he showed up.
Yes.
He was involved. Not always when cameras were on and not always when there was going to be attention.
Yeah.
But he just would pop in places and was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like where he thought they needed help or someone told him they needed help or something was going on. He mentioned his synagogue had bomb threats and Jesse Jackson just pulled up one day. Didn't tell anybody and just pulled up to show his support. I think that's a pretty cool way to put it.
It ends up
being, good observation.
It ends up being a really significant part of the job then. It really was showing up. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, there were stretches in his career where it did look like he was showing up in places where he made sure the cameras were, but there were many chapters to the Jackson career, I think. And a lot of times that's really how you are successful, is that you show up when you're not expected or when there's not a lot of fanfare to go with it. And again, when it comes to the economics of it, and his organization was Push out of Chicago, Operation Breadbasket. A lot of that was, again, very economic in nature, attempting to help people on those sorts of grassroots level. And I think over a period of time, as he matured, he got to a better place. It is interesting to be struck also, like I said, by the message that he laid out in 1988 at the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, because if you go a little deeper, and that speech is available online pretty easily, you can get the whole speech. It comes off as not a far left big time progressive message at all. And there's parts of it where I say, I wonder how many progressives today would be willing to endorse and even repeat that same sort of message. Very different time, obviously, but it is interesting to look back on it for that reason. let's pause here, and we'll get caught up. As I said, we've got Lavelle. Emergency Lavelle is scheduled for 4:30 today. We've got Louis at 5:30 as well. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line has indeed been rebooted for the start of the show. We'll keep you updated on some Winter Olympic stuff as well. 64686. Back in just a minute.
Yeah.
Any update on the cheating scandal in curling? Are things quiet on a little bit more quiet on the curling front today, or is it still red hot?
I think it's calm. I don't know though.
All right. Anybody else knows? Hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 646.
Haven't got any Google alerts
86. On it. Yeah, we probably would have, because that we want the controversy, we want the negativity. It's like all the columnists. Please discuss Jesse Jackson's outstanding oratory skills. It was one of his strengths. I mean, to me, there's nobody quite like MLK, but he could belt out a speech.
Oh, yeah.
There's not any question. In fact, somebody had it, but I didn't save it. Did he make a famous appearance, he being Jesse Jackson, either hosting Saturday Night Live or just as a guest on Saturday Night Live?
He read Green Eggs and Ham.
Oh, it's the Green Eggs and Ham.
On Weekend Update, I think.
That's what it was. We should play that later.
Yeah.
That is absolutely...
Just deadpanned it, too.
And he just nailed it.
Yeah.
It was tremendous. Yeah, that's what it was. We should probably play that. I am reminded, looking back through some of the stuff that's been offered up today, that in 2023, Jesse Jackson resigned as president of the Rainbow Push Coalition. His degenerative disorder was eventually diagnosed not as Parkinson's, because in 2017, he announced he had Parkinson's disease and planned to remain as active as long as possible. I steadfastly affirm that I would rather wear out than rust out. And, well, of course, as Neil Young always said, rust never sleeps. A long time ago, he said that. Much to the chagrin of John Lennon, who disagreed with him. More on that later. In 2023, as I said, Jesse Jackson resigns as president of his Rainbow Push Coalition, and eventually his degenerative disorder was diagnosed not as Parkinson's, but something called progressive supranuclear palsy, which I'm not familiar with. In late 2025, so just late last year, he was hospitalized in Chicago, and the Rainbow Push Coalition said that, quote, the family appreciates all prayers at this time. So that was, I guess, the unfortunate health spiral that he was on that led to this news breaking earlier today. Jackson, as you say, was nowhere near the importance of MLK and the civil rights movement. I agree. But to me, given his visibility over the decades as the perhaps last vestiges of that era, makes him as important as King in the fight for equality since Memphis. It's a fair point that his connection with the movement. Again, look up the age of MLK when he was murdered. I want to say he was early. I want to say he was either like 34 years old. He was definitely in his 30s.
39.
Correct? 39 years old. Okay, fair enough. And, there were other civil rights leaders murdered who didn't get a chance to grow old. And so there is something to that Jackson's importance was his linkage to the heart of that movement going into the 60s and certainly the late 60s for sure. There's not any question about that. And, he ended up, and he also crossed over because, as we talked about with Jonathan Eig, he crossed over into politics and became a legitimate presidential candidate. Now, did he ever have much chance of winning? Probably not so much, but he opened the door a bit that it wasn't so irrational to think that this could possibly, that a black man could actually run for office and have either a national appeal or even a national following. And that was part of his legacy. And how did he do that? Because he stayed alive and he stayed around a long time, but he is a link to exactly that. It's a very fair point.
We want Green Eggs and Ham?
Oh, you got it now? Yeah, let's do it.
Kevin Nealon's going to throw it to you here.
Okay.
This from the Reverend Jesse Jackson Instagram page.
And this is, do we know what year he would have done this?
It had to be mid-'90s if Kevin
era?
Nealon was
Yeah,
the
okay.
Weekend Update host.
All right, fair enough.
Readers, as Dr. Seuss died this week at the age of 87. Like many of us, I grew up with Dr. Seuss, and one of my favorite stories is Green Eggs and Ham. Here to read from this classic is the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend?
Tonight, rather than read from 1st and 2nd Samuel, I read from Sam I Am. According to the Latter-day Saint Seuss, you do not like green eggs and ham? I do not like them. Sam I Am. I could not, would not on a boat. I will not with a goat. I will not eat them in the rain. I will not eat them on a train. Not in the dark, not on a tree, not in a car. You let me be. I do not like them in a box. I do not like them with a fox. I will not eat them in a house. I do not like them with a mouse. I do not like them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am. You do not like them? So you say. Try them, and you may. Try them, and you may, I say. Sam, if you will let me be, I will try them, you will see. Say, I like green eggs and ham. I do, I like them, Sam, I am. And I would eat them in a boat. And I would eat them with a goat. I do so like green eggs and ham. Thank you, Sam. I am.
So, to 651 guy who asked earlier for us to discuss Jesse's outstanding oratory skills, what better example? Not doing a speech, not on the stump, but offering up on live TV green eggs and ham and making it sound profound, making it sound mythic, making it sound like something that's very significant was indeed at stake. That's pretty good.
He ripped his glasses off halfway through. It was good stuff. Yeah, very good. He had a famous thing on Sesame Street as well that's been making the rounds.
Yes, I've seen that one too. That's the I Am Somebody one, right?
Yes.
That he repeats over a number of times in front of a group of a fairly large group of kids for sure. This is from 612 guy. My father passed away from PSP in 2017. It's a Parkinson's-like disease that impacts mobility and also has some cognitive impact, and it can eventually lead to near total paralysis. We felt blessed, ironically, of course, that my dad died before it progressed to that point. Like you, had not heard of it before heard of this before my dad was diagnosed. By the way, Linda Ronstadt also has this same condition, PSP. And we've had a number of people, and PSP stands for Progressive Supranuclear Palsy. And another texter says that his father-in-law had it, but it was also misdiagnosed as Parkinson's originally. And that's apparently what Jesse first announced or revealed that he thought he had. And maybe at that point, that's what the doctors thought he had as well. Guest lineup the rest of the way. And we'll come back to Ode to a Dead Guy and Jesse Jackson before this show is done, I'm sure, once or twice. In addition, we've got Louis scheduled for 5:30, Tuesday regular, and we are going to a little emergency Lavelle for all the obvious reasons. The news not good for your Minnesota Twins. Looks like the Pablo Lopez season is over before it has even begun. The MRI results come in, and they're pretty grim. So it looks like it's going to be another Tommy John surgery for Pablo. We'll get. I don't think Lavel's down there yet. I think he's heading down there, but he's not down there yet. But we'll get his view on the cosmic significance of it all. And it is, I think, a fair question to ask. Whatever plan the Twins think they have under this new regime, might they be better served altering it and trading everybody away? You know, and I hate that thinking. We all hate it because of what we're dealing with here. But I'll ask again. To me, it's almost a distinction without a difference at this point. If you're down $65 million over the last two seasons, right?
Right.
I know Tom Pollak keeps saying, well, it's ridiculous that the over-under for us is 73.5. We're going to be better than you think. But where are we really going? And so if you're not really going anywhere and you've decided, as sad as it is, that you're going to continue to cut payroll with allegedly this plan later where we're going to start bringing the money back in, would you be better served stripping it down if you get really good offers for a Buxton or for,
Joe Ryan.
I guess Joe Ryan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, who are we kidding?
So are you advocating for responsible tanking?
Yeah, well, I guess, but in this way, they can't really even call it tanking if you trade away those best players. If you have them and then don't use them, that would be irresponsible tanking.
Right.
But if you're trading them away and then, well, this is what we got left. We're just putting the people out there that we have left, and we're going to throw them out there. Speaking of people back, by the way, throwing people back out there, Mike Conley is officially back with our favorite basketball team. We knew it was coming.
Yeah, I guess today was the last day.
Today was the last day. Yeah, they had to get to 14 today. They still have room to add one more to get to 15. One of those buyout guys that might still be available. But the Conley move is official. We're hoping to get him back soon. I hope maybe even later this week, because I'd love to hear the saga. You know, what this whole thing's been like for him to be in this sort of netherworld, even though he probably had been communicated with and knew that the Wolves intended to bring him back. It's still, the whole process had to be a little bit surreal to him. You know, you're with the team, then you're gone from the team, and then you're traded twice.
Rudy's looking for you on the bus. You're not there.
On the bus. He's talking to an empty seat on the bus.
Right, like Clint Eastwood.
Exactly it. So hopefully at some point this week we get a little bonus Mike Conley as well. Stay